Hi guys, welcome to the 12th episode of the Book Nook. I'm your host Olivia, and today we have a very special episode. We have a special guest author, Olivia Snow, and I'm very excited to interview her. And yeah, let's just get into it. So, my first question for her is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, how did you begin your writing journey? Have you always wanted to be an author, or was there a specific moment that inspired you to pursue a writing career?
Sure. Okay. So I'll first just kind of introduce myself. I am an author, and I have published a YA fantasy romance book, and I'm currently in the process of my next book is a Regency romance, and it's going to be with my editor probably by the time this episode airs. And so I'm just kind of experiencing which genre I want to pursue a little bit more. But a little bit just about me outside of the authorhood is I kind of keep busy. I teach an English class once a week at kind of it's like a preparatory academy, and that's with fourth and fifth graders, and I have them write their own books during the school year, so that's kind of fun. I also teach two children's choirs at our local theater, and I do musical theater as well. And so most recently, I was Anastasia in the musical Anastasia, and that was super fun. Um, as far as how I got started into writing, I wrote a lot as a kid. My first book was a really bad Twilight knockoff retelling, but instead of vampires, it was time travelers. And
Oh,
unfortunately, that is lost to time. Like it's on this, old computer that no longer exists, which is devastating to me. I would love to read that. Oh well. Um, but my mom actually knew that I was going to be an author before I did. She just kind of sniffed that out, and I didn't. It wasn't really until I had my first child 7 years ago, as of yesterday, that he would like sleep on me, and I was trapped in a chair, and I couldn't do anything. He like refused to sleep in a crib or anything, and so I was just trapped in this chair while he slept on me for hours on end. And I was like, what do I do with myself? Like this, there's only so much TV. And so I just started brainstorming book ideas and kind of writing those down. And then it turned into writing the book. And then it turned into that book being really bad. And then it turned into me really wanting to learn how to write. And so then I learned how to, did a lot of studying, and then bada bing, bada boom.
wow.
Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's so interesting. No, I can definitely relate to that because I've also loved writing since I was really young. So,
Oh, good.
yeah, thanks for telling us about
Yeah.
yourself. Um, my second question is like kind of more about your writing career. Like, how have your personal experiences kind of affected you as a writer? And yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I have like a really cool story. It's not like I was a paramedic for 20 years and then I write thriller fiction or something. It's more just I I think part of my author brand, if can say that, is humor. Like I try and always put humor into my books. Like there's always going to be funny things that happen in my books. Actually, the book I'm writing right now is a very like I would say serious kind of existential book. It's kind of about reapers and
Oh,
death. And that sounds really like a downer, but it's actually I think going to be the funniest book I've ever written. Um,
oh, wow.
to like for example, the main character guy, there's like a dual character. So his character is he's a reaper, but like he's trapped on Earth, and all he wants to do is like watch the final episode of a K drama that he's been trying to watch for and he just can't because he's non corporeal. Anyway, so it's like very funny. I think like most recently with my Regency book, I grew up watching Pride and Prejudice and stuff with my mom. Like it was our soul food movie. So anytime one of us was sad, we'd watch Pride and Prejudice. So we watched it like 1,000 times. And then I think just more generally, like kind of on that same line, my mom has been sick since I was in first grade, second grade, and so a lot of the things we would do together to bond was just like sitting in her bed and watching shows together. And so I watched a ton of just like really fun shows as a kid, like Battlestar Galactica and
Hmm.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Star Trek, and like those kind of gave me like this love of sci-fi and fantasy and speculative fiction and just like good storytelling. Um, and so I think just that time with her really made me love stories that are kind of fun and different.
Oh, that's so sweet. Um, okay, so moving on to my next question is, what's your favorite part about writing?
It feels like playing. Like when I was a kid, I would play dolls, but I didn't really like I didn't really have dolls. I would make my own. I called them girls. I know it's weird. I would like tie socks together and make a like my own doll. And I would those like girls, those dolls would play out the most like traumatic storylines. They had, just so much like death and violence, and they had like overcoming evil. Uh, and I just feel like as authors, it's like we get to play with dolls, but as adults, because we just get to like make these characters, and then we get to make them kiss, and we just get to make them do things that we want to see play out. And so it's playing, but in a way that you can share with other people too. So I think that's my favorite part.
Yeah, that's great. I love the creative aspect of writing so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the most difficult part about writing, and what's the biggest challenge you faced so far as an author?
The execution of writing. I think you can have a million really fun, amazing ideas, and you can have this idea that you want like a really great romance, you want the chemistry, you want this character, you want this character arc, you want this plot twist, and then it's like actually putting the idea onto a piece of paper or onto a Word document or whatever is a totally different skill. I think it takes a lot of creativity to come up with an idea, and it takes a lot of creativity plus perseverance to get that idea onto so that it actually executes on the page. And that's been the hardest part for me, because I can come up like, especially with romance, I'm just like, man, I want this electric romance. And it's like, you think you're doing all the things and it's still just not jumping off the page, because you just can't execute it. And it just takes a lot of grinding and a lot of being open for critiques, to have people, be able to read your work and have it be bad, and have them give you feedback on it, and then you make it better, and like you can get feedback, but then you don't know how to fix it. It's very overwhelming. So the execution, not the hardest part.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, can you kind of walk us through your writing process? How do you usually start writing, and do you do any specific writing exercises?
Oh boy. Okay. So I think I go a little hardcore when I'm getting ready to write something. I'm definitely not a pantser. I'm an outliner to the extreme, probably too much so, to my detriment. So it all starts, I try and have we get a writing spark, right? Some sort of fun thing that's like, oh, like this would be fun. Like for my book that's out, Mound of Lost Memories, I would get the spark that's like, oh, like what if it was Beauty and the Beast, but instead of Beauty, being captured by the Beast and being imprisoned there, what if she was a spy and she was there willingly, and like she was trying to steal from him? And like you get a fun spark, and then so that's step one. And then I talk it out with my writing buddy. Her name's Sarah. We went to college together, and we both have editing degrees, and so it's like the perfect synergy where she writes books and I'll edit them, and I write books and she edits them. And together, me and my writing buddy Sarah, over the last 7 years, have compiled this 100-page document that we call the Ultimate Outline Tool. And it's ridiculous. But we've kind of gathered ideas from all sorts of books and articles like Story Genius and the Fantasy Fiction Formula and yada yada. And we've combined it into, like I said, it's like over 100 pages long, step by step, just making sure we hit all the beats of a story. And I'll go through and fill that out. And and then I make the thickest outline. Like right now, for my Reaper book, I think my outline is at 30 pages, and I just hit the midpoint. It's ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
I know, and I have like a million comments on the side. It's just I just start to like play out the scene in my head, and it's truly probably like should be more like a first draft. Like it's like the summarized version of a first draft. Anyway, and so if you want to hear, I can share with you what some of the steps are on the outline tool, just to show you like what kind of is involved in it. Do you want to hear some of those?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I won't clearly I'm not going to list out all 100 pages, but some of the big parts that have been really helpful to me are like checking your concept to make sure your concept kind of hits all the right notes, like the what if this were to happen, and that it's unique and that it has inherent conflict, and all those things. With the probably the biggest chunk of the outline tool is focused on the character building for the protagonist. So breaking down things like misbeliefs, their origin scenes, their fears, their insecurities, what their aha moment of truth is, their personality, being able to kind of break down their personality into what we call the double-edged sword, where that allows you to go deep into their personality instead of wide. And so, for example, like you have a Sherlock Holmes character, and his double-edged sword personality type is that he's really, really brilliant. That's the good side of that sword. And then the other side of that sword is that he's really, really rude, right? And like he's just so dismissive. And so but both of those kind of tie into the same thing, and it's not two random traits, but kind of making sure our protagonists share traits that relate to each other, that go deep instead of wide. And so that's a huge part of it. And then it goes into talking about like the main story goal, making sure that your main story goal has like a yes or no question behind it. Like, can they do this? Yes or no? And then answering that at the end. Like, is it a yes and or a no but? Going into the framework of a story, that's very much like the archetypes of a story, just kind of setting up reader expectations and making sure that if you do defy reader expectations, that you have kind of a twist or a reason why. Things like ticking clocks, making sure that your book is ticking down so that the stakes feel high and that you can feel the progress of the story happening, right? There's a deadline that if they don't meet, the characters are in big trouble. And of course, romance. We like to build it off the 7-beat structure for it's like romancing the beat, I think, but we actually added to it because we just take stuff and then we make it our own and we just go crazy with it. It's got the antagonist and like the end. I'm probably like boring you by now, but one thing that's interesting, one thing that like we invented that we added to the outline tool that I'll share here, and then I'll stop just talking about this thing, is what we call the chiasmus tool. And this is like how we like to write our beginnings. So we actually plot out the end of our books before we ever touch the beginning of our books. Because if you don't have a strong ending on your book, you have nothing. And so we do the ending, and then what we look at the beats of the ending, like what happens, what are the big important moments, and then we flip them around. So chiasmus is I think it's like, has to do with Judaic, Hebrew poetry. Like it's a form of Hebraic poetry where it's like you have A, B, C, D, and then it slips and then goes C, B, A. So like it flips it. And so we take the ending beats and then we make sure that there are kind of echoes in the beginning of a book that match the order of the ending beats. And that helps you know like what kind of things to introduce in what order in your beginning of your book, so that the first thing you introduce is actually the last beat of your book. And it creates this nice cyclical feeling. Anyway, that was a lot. But that's kind of the craziness that we go into before. And like, that's why it takes me so long to plan out a book, is I'm thinking about all of these things before I even write page one.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you start from the ending and then like go backwards. I think that's really interesting. But thanks for sharing your outline of how you start writing. Okay, so now moving on, which phase of the writing process is your favorite? Like the first draft or the publishing part or marketing, anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think probably publishing is the best part because it's done and then you get to hold it. Like, I don't think any author would say it different, but beyond that one, probably the first draft. I just think that the stakes are so low. You have, at least for me, you have a major outline and everything feels planned out and everything's feeling pretty sturdy. And then you just get to finally play. And yes, the execution part is hard, but also the stakes are so low because you just know you can revise a million times. And so you're just kind of meeting your characters for the first time. Like, I feel like I can really try and plan them out in the outlining phase. But once I actually get to see them in their dialogue and how they move and talk to each other and crack jokes and stuff, it's just so much fun. Writing the humor is really hard in the first draft. It always takes me like 10 tries to try and like nail a joke on a page. And so that's a lot of like me staring at the screen being like, be funny, right? And it's just not happening. And so like there'll be like brackets that are like hilarious joke here, right? But that's the nice thing is like you can just move on. And then in the revision stage, it gets a lot harder because then you actually have to be funny and you actually have to make decisions. So
Yeah. Yeah, the first draft is very like chill, like you could just write whatever you want, but yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so how long did it take you to go from your first draft of your book to the final published version?
good question. So for Mountain of Lost Memories, which I have here, I should like hold it up. There it is. That took me 3 years. This was the second book I've written. The first one I told you was really bad. Okay, it was like really bad. It was like almost 300,000 words. I don't know what was going on. That was the one that I wrote with like my baby sleeping on me. That one, no one will ever see that book. Anyway, but this book took me 3 years. And I think that's partially because I was learning. You know, it's definitely, I think your first book is, or, you know, your first published book is always a learning experience. And it took me about 1 year to draft the first draft. And then it took me 2 years of revisions, which is insane. But boy, I learned so much during that time. My Regency was much different. I drafted it in about 8-9 months, and then I revised it for the rest of that. And it's taken, and I think by the time it'll publish, which will be, I think February, maybe March, if I have to push it down, it'll just be like 1.5 years, which is a lot more reasonable and manageable. It's also a much shorter book. And I think my Reaper book will probably be about the same. Partially, it's just because I have 2 little kids and, you know, 2 jobs and just trying to fit it all in. So I'm like looking forward to the day when my kids are in kindergarten, my little one. Like, ooh, maybe I can put out a book in a year. Like, that's the dream. So, but for now, it takes a little longer.
Yeah, no, I think it's so great how you can balance being a mom and your jobs and writing, all that. Like, that's amazing. Okay, so the next question is, can you share just a fun anecdote or memorable moment from the writing process of writing Mount of Lost Memories?
Yes, I have 2. Can I share 2?
Yeah.
Okay. The first is when I was finishing up the first draft for Mount of Lost Memories, I was 3 chapters away, and then I went into labor with my youngest. And yes, my youngest, with my youngest. Okay. So I went in, yeah, I was in labor and I was 3 drafts away, and I promised myself I would finish my book before I gave birth. And you know what? I did. And so I have this great picture with me, and I need to send it to you so you can like put it on the screen or something, of me in the hospital, like with the hospital gown, like giant belly, computer on my belly, and I'm typing furiously. Their nurses are like coming in and like putting needles in me and stuff, and I'm just like, shh. Like, it's the climax, okay? Like, shh. They thought it was so funny. Every time they came in, they'd be like, okay, like, how's the book going? How many chapters left? And I'd be like, 2 more. Anyway, I actually think I maybe finished it right after I gave birth. Like, he was sleeping, and I had like 300 more words or something. It was insane. And like, it was so, my husband was like, you were having contractions and you would pause writing and have the contraction and then continue typing. So it was absolutely insane. And I don't know why I gave myself that deadline, other than I just knew that it would be a few months until I could really sit down and write again. And I couldn't leave those 3, like the last 3 chapters done. Like, I had to finish them. And so, just so you know, the last 3 chapters of this book were written in the hospital between contractions. So that's anecdote
That
number
is
1.
crazy. Wow.
I think it is great. I think I'm like literally insane. Okay, so the second anecdote, in my hometown, this made national news. There was a kidnapper in my town. You're like, where is this story going? How is this tied into your book? Okay. So this guy literally this is so terrible. This is terrible, terrible. He would kidnap women, and he put this woman in his basement, and he built a cinder block dungeon that he put her in. It's insane. This happened like down the road. And he the woman eventually escapes. She's okay. She escapes. She contacts the authorities. The guy is taken in. He's now in prison. I guess that's as happy as that story can end. But he was evicted, of course, going to prison. And, the policemen clear out the cinder block dungeon and stuff. But then the landlord, she put all of his furniture out on the side of the road. Now pause that story there for a moment and let me go to the YMCA, which is where, before my kid went to preschool, which is where I would write every day. I would take my kids to the child watch, and I would sit there on the couch and type away for 2 hours while they were in childcare. Well, I would do that 5 days a week, and the staff of the YMCA would would come up to me and say like, "Man, we need to get you an office. Like, we need to get you an office space here because you're just here typing. Like, we need to get you a desk." Well, sure enough, one day a desk and a chair appears in the corner of the YMCA, and I think you know where this is going. I ask, "Hey, where'd you get that desk?" They got it from the side of the road of the kidnapper's house.
Oh.
And so the desk at which I wrote the majority of Mount of Lost Memories is a kidnapper's desk. And I like to
Wow.
think that the aura of the drama kind of seeped into my books and made them a little, I don't want to say spicier. That's not the right word nowadays. A little more dramatic. So it was written at the kidnapper's desk.
Wow, that is insane. Wow, those are such interesting stories. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now let's talk about your book, Mount of Lost Memories. Can you just give us a brief summary of what it's about?
You bet. So I think the briefest summary is that it's just about a girl who feels like an outsider and is off to go steal the only magic in the world in order to prove herself. That's the one sentence long version. Kind of the more like the back blurb is the main character's name is Mara, and she lives in a clan that is kind of like a matriarchal mercenary clan that I call the War Maidens, very based off of Vikings, like shield maidens. Now they are what I think the closest thing is warrior poets, which means that they're skilled mercenaries in fighting, but they're also skilled at things like negotiation and scribing, right? They're kind of like they have different branches. So there's war maidens that specialize in fighting, and there's war maidens that specialize in writing and archives and stuff. And so it's this whole kind of clan of specialized women that you can hire out for different things. And our main character, Mayra, had the classic, like, left at the gates as a baby, and the War Maiden clan adopted her into their clan, but she is not one of them. She's an outsider among them. And this War Maiden clan has very strict codes about who can and cannot train. Really, you have to be like from the blood lineage in order to train to be these amazing skilled women. And so she's not. And so she just works in the kitchens. And all she wants is to become one of them, because the woman who leads the clan mother, is kind of the one who adopted her before she became clan mother. And then once she became the leader, she had to kind of separate herself from Mayra. So it's very much like, I want family, I want a mother, right? And I don't belong. And so she and the clan mother kind of find this loophole in the codes that allows Mayra to maybe one day become a war maiden. But in order to do that, she has to kind of successfully complete what they call a calling, which is like a mission, like when someone hires them as a mercenary. And the calling is to go to this place called the Mount, which is an isolated magical mountain fortress that houses the only magic in the world. They kind of hoard it away. And that's an issue because there's this big famine in the world and it's causing wars and bad things. And so the clan mother kind of secretly sends her to this place to steal the magic. And that's very against the codes. And so really only Mayra can do it because she hasn't taken the oaths that the other war maidens have. And so the clan mother's like, hey, like, do this thing, become a war maiden. You're the only one who can do it because we can't steal, we can't lie, but you can. And it creates this awful contention in Mayra's like inner thoughts where she's like, oh, I want to take the oaths and I want to be honorable and I want to be like them. But in order for me to do that, I have to lie and steal and be deceitful. And so like, how do I reconcile those two things? Like, can I do an evil thing for something that's good? And anyway, so that's the big dilemma of her character arc. And the majority of the story takes place in the Mount, which is very much, I kind of think of it like imagine if a whole bunch of researchers from like a college professors all just lived together for hundreds of years and all they did was research on top of research, and they just like, that was what was fun for them. That's how the Mount is for mages. So they just do like all this research on their magic, and then they just kind of are self-serving on it instead of helping other people. And so she goes, and the whole story is like, can she learn about what the magic is? Can she steal it? And can she get away? But there's a big problem because there's a very handsome prince who has very opposite goals from her. And he's very mysterious what his goals are, and you learn kind of what it is. But he's very much bumps heads against her and is a huge obstacle for her. And of course, there's a romance with the prince and all that stuff. And he's a very funny, kind of irritating but snarky, clever character. And that is very infuriating for someone like Mayra, who just wants to be good and on the straight and narrow path, right? And he's just so infuriating. And so ultimately the story's about kind of finding belonging and finding love and believing in oneself and learning how to like find belonging in just yourself instead of searching for it externally. And so it's a story about forgiveness and love.
Yes, I love that. The plot sounds so, so good. Okay, my next question is, what was your biggest source of inspiration in writing this book?
Yeah, I think I kind of answered this earlier. That I just wanted it to be, I really wanted to do a very loosely based fairy tale retelling. And honestly, you would read this book and you would never even know that this was a fairy tale retelling in my mind. And it was, I had the idea like of Beauty and the Beast, and what if instead of her being imprisoned there, she was a spy and she was stealing something. And so, he's a beast because he's kind of insufferable and he's rude. And like I said, she's in this isolated mountain place and she can't leave until she steals the magic. And that's kind of fun. So it's, like I said, you'd read it, you'd never know, but that was the initial spark that came up with the idea.
Okay, and which character in Mount of Lost Memories is your favorite, and which one do you relate to the most?
So my favorite character is the prince. His name is Corin. He's really funny, and I just love a snarky MMC. But he's also got this ongoing joke, and I post about it on my Instagram sometimes, and like the people who've read it are like, they get it, and they're like, it's the if you know, you know. With yams, like there's this ongoing joke that he just loves like sweet potato, like yams. And it's kind of like his weapon of choice, and it's so random and funny, and I just find that sort of thing humorous. But I also like him because I think he's got a really fun character arc with the wounds. Like he's very much like humor as a deflection tool, right? As a kind of a coping mechanism. And that's always a trope that I love that character immediately. But as far as like which character do I relate to the most, there's this cat that really likes to sleep, and his name is Spoon, and I think it's probably that one.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of answered this question already, but what would you say is the central theme of this book?
The central theme is finding where you belong. So just a few examples for the characters. Mayra, right? I think she's very much learns about herself and realizes that there's more out there than just the War Maiden clan, right? I think that it's very much like if you try to, like you get born into a place and it's got your own community and you kind of feel like that's it, but then you can go out into the world and realize that there's more out there, and you're not just limited to this one thing that is trying to define who you are, but rather you get to kind of define who you are. With the prince, with Corin, he's very much like learning to open up his heart to other people because he's closed it off for years. And so he's kind of learning how to belong again with other people because he's purposefully taken himself out of a place of belonging, and then he has to open himself back up to that. And then there's this character who's kind of like the best friend character. Her name's Namari, and she is from the Mount, and she never fit in. She's all the mages are very interested in magic, and she's very interested in kind of what I call Muggle studies. In the book, it's called like the Lowlanders, but it's the people who don't have magic, and so she's very interested in them, and that ostracizes her among other reasons. And so she kind of learns how to find belonging among her own people, and even when she's different from them. So those are a few examples.
Yes, I love that theme of belonging. I think it's so great. Okay, now this is the second to last question. What's next for you in your writing career? I know you mentioned that you're writing your Regency book, but can you just tell us a little bit more about what's next for you?
Yeah. So I have a Regency book coming out in a few months. As you said, and for people who don't know what Regency means, it's a kind of like Jane Austen books. It's written during the Prince Regent era of England. So my book takes place in 1815 England during the London season. And usually it's like Bridgerton. Okay, it's just Bridgerton. Um, and that's currently with the editor. I was going to query that book. It won a first page contest, and it was a finalist at another really big first page contest. And I was like, oh, like maybe this really has legs. Like maybe I should query it. I was talking with an agent, and she like what actually one of my prizes for the contest was to get her feedback on a query package, and I was gonna wrap it all up in a nice fancy query package and send it out to people. And then I just started like really feeling like that wasn't the right choice. Ultimately, and I don't know if you want me to go into this, but I decided to self-publish this one as well, mainly because I didn't know if Regency was the genre I wanted to attach myself to so early on, and yeah, I'm still kind of just figuring that out. So, but there's other reasons too. But that book's with my editor, and I've been working on all the other stuff for it, the cover and yada yada, and so that will come out, and that'll be really fun. That one's going to be a really fun book. It's yeah, maybe you can just stay tuned on that one. I'll because it's not out yet, but and then after that, I'm writing that weird little Reaper book, that's like about death in like a really funny macabre way. And that genre is tough. Like I don't mean to keep jumping genres, but I'm also like, I'm not ready to really settle on one. I just kind of want to find my voice as an author before I make my brand. And so this book, I guess would be a contemporary fantasy, or maybe even a contemporary paranormal romance. But that gives like a lot of weird vibes. It's like, like ghosts and scary, and it's not. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, okay. Um, and my last question for you is what advice do you have for other aspiring authors?
That's a great question. So I think my number one piece of advice is just to get used to grinding. And what I mean by that is coming up with a story idea is so fun. I mean, the world is laid out before you, and you have so many choices you can make, and it's just like dreaming about it is fun. Writing the first draft is really fun. And then once you finish the first draft, you look at your story and you see the plot holes, and you see that the prose is not where you want it. And you see issues where your character arcs just aren't working, or there's a million things. Like you're just juggling a million balls at once when you're writing a story, and you drop more than half of them along the way. And so then as you revise, you got to start picking up all these balls, and you still keep dropping them. And sometimes when you pick up a ball and throw it back in, it causes two more to fall out, and it's just frustrating. And if you're anything like me, like you cry a lot. Like I cry a lot when I write books because it's just so close to my heart. And it's so frustrating to see it not work. Again, back to the execution, right? And so, for Mount of Lost Memories, this one right here, I think I had written the fifth draft. And remember, I've been revising for like a year and a half at this point. And then my writing buddy is like, hey, you realize that your love interest doesn't come in until it was like chapter 11, which is like a sin. I think that would have been a crime. And I said, yeah, well, he can't because he's in an isolated mountain fortress. Like, there's not much I can do about that. And she said, you need to have him way earlier. And I cried and cried. And I literally, it was one of those calls where I just like, was like, okay, I need to go now. And then I just closed the phone and then stared at the wall, And then I realized, yeah, like I have to put him in. And so I deleted 10 chapters, and this is in my fifth draft. And then
Wow.
I put new chapters in. And now he comes in chapter 3, which is still a little late, but like not, could be worse. In my other two books, he comes in chapter 1. Anyway, but boy, it sucks. And it was a grind, right? Like I had to sit there down and rewrite and then revise and then rewrite and then revise. And then you read that chapter again and then you revise it, and you just get so sick of your book. And there's going to get to be a point where you think your book is crap and you still have to work on it. You can't just give it up, right? I think we're kind of tempted to do two things when we get to that point. We either want to just give up and jump to the next story idea that looks really shiny and looks a lot more promising than the current book we're writing, or we just say, it's good enough. Like, I'm just going to put it out there. And I think I don't know, I can't tell for sure, but I think that's maybe why we get a lot of books out there especially from indie authors that aren't quite there. Like, they feel like they needed a little extra work on them still. Um, anyway, but your story deserves the time and the effort to make it the best it can be. And I think that, it's dangerous because, like, we don't want to think that it has to be perfect because no book will ever be perfect, right? We can just get it to where it is the right story, where the story is told the way it needs to be. Um, but yeah, just get used to grinding and like sitting down and it feels like work where it's not fun anymore. There gets to be a point with the revisions where it's not fun anymore and it is work. And it's really what separates the boys from the men, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your answers. This brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much, Olivia, for this interview. It was great talking to you. Everyone, make sure to check out Mound of Lost Memories, available on Amazon, Kindle Unlimited, and also as an ebook. And be sure to stay tuned for her Regency book coming out in March, February.
It'll be February or March. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, February, March of next year. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. This was a really fun and great episode. Remember to subscribe and follow my Instagram, follow Olivia's Instagram as well. And just tune in next week for my next episode. I have new episodes every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Spotify and YouTube. So yeah, I'm your host Olivia and signing off.